Hey everybody, this is Matthew Soltesiak and you're listening to Not the Same Old Lions podcast. Welcome to another episode. Today we're going to take an overview look at this past season as well as expectations leading up to the season. I'm joined by Coach Jerry Angers, Michigan High School Football Coach of the Year in 2016, also named Coach of the Week by the Detroit Lions in 2019. He's mentored 70 players to the college level, 2 all the way up to the NFL. Coach, good to have you here.
Great to be here.
All right, I want to start by talking about our expectations leading into last season. And again, we want to be careful we don't do revisionist history and say we knew all these things we didn't know that were going to happen. But, in Campbell's first season, they were 0-10-1. And they went 3-3 to finish the season. And, what were you thinking during last offseason about the Lions' potential for this current season that just ended?
Well, I thought the same thing, especially the way they finished strong the previous year. I knew coming into this year, and of course we can talk about hard knocks and seeing all that stuff, and the draft, and basically how they're lining up, which player was going to fit into which position. We all go back to we're going to bite kneecaps, and he got the boys in there for that. So we definitely good to see, and it was excited for the season to start.
Yeah, I'll tell you, the first half of his first season, I had a lot of questions about Jared Goff. And then you look back and you realize the pieces around him weren't in place and all that. But when the season ended 3-3, those last 6 games, I am a typical Lions fan who has a lot more optimism than maybe I should. And so going into the season, my hopes were quite high for the Lions. I was like, I actually remember sitting on the lake shore of Lake Michigan with my father-in-law and brother-in-law saying, I could see 8 or 9 wins. I said, I don't know that we're going to make the seasons, but I think 8 or 9 wins, which obviously we know that's kind of right where they fell. Did you have any win total expectation or not really?
I mean, you and I talked a few times in the hallway at school about that. If they win 9, if they win 8, if they squeak into the playoffs. But you go back to that 3-3 that start or the end of the season, the previous year, and they changed their OC, and we know who the OC is now, but Dan Campbell was calling the plays with him. So I think when you see stuff like that and they're making the changes with the bodies that they have, there were some situations during the season that they made some changes, to shake things up, whether it's player room or coach's room. And, you can see there's writing on the wall that this may turn out to be a lot of fun to watch.
For sure. And, the hard knocks bump before the season just kind of poured more Kool-Aid into the jar, if you will, and got us even that much more excited going into the season. And, before the season started, I talked to my uncle. I'm like, all right, we're going to a game. What game are we going to go to? And we're like, season opener could be good. The Packer game is always a good one to choose. And so ultimately we chose the Packer game. But let's talk about that start. That start was, 1-6, right? Not what I don't think anybody expected based on what people were reporting coming out of training camp, and then obviously the hard knocks thing. So 1-6. What were your thoughts when the Lions were going through that?
Again, I looked at it. New coaching staff. You're under their belt. New offensive coordinator. A ton of young players. What they did against Philadelphia week 1. Down, I remember 14 or whatever. They came back, lost by 3, and those are the points when I watched those from a coaching standpoint. Said this team is going to be good. You have to look at and that 1-5, 1-6 start. Of course, after the 1-5 start, they made the changes with the coordinators. They traded a very good tight end, but things made a big difference on that. But you could tell as your podcast that it's not the same old Lions. And I think that was one of the things. Coach Glenn, you talk about the defense giving up a ton of points. There's a lot of young bodies. And when your leader at safety is lost for the season with a bunch of young individuals that just get out of the college ranks, there's some growth. And there's some growing pains, I should say. And we saw how the growth went as the season went on.
Oh, for sure. I mean, with the injuries, you saw rookies being thrust into a starting role where they were supposed to be a backup for most, if not all, the season. It was kind of crazy thinking, all right, some people were actually calling for a coaching change at 1-6 and wondering if he was on the hot seat. And again, I feel like a lot of the people that said that were like maybe people who didn't really understand the Detroit Lions and understand the culture that Coach Campbell, General Manager Brad Holmes were building there. And so going into that, I went to the Green Bay game, and the Lions were 1-6, and we showed up there, and there were still some empty seats at Ford Field, but it was pretty packed, because Packers, good rivalry game, always going to bring that out. But the atmosphere was pretty amazing in that game. Now, you know, the Lions offense didn't show up and put up amazing stats that day. It was the defense that actually kind of started showing some things up and was the difference maker with 3 interceptions. But the celebratory feeling that day when the Lions won that game was pretty amazing.
Yeah, for sure. You know, I watching it on TV, and you were sending me pictures, of course, and which I enjoyed. You know, you having your family down there is just totally awesome. But you know that the biggest thing is, you know, from a coaching standpoint and as a fan standpoint, when the owner backs the coach when they're 1-5, 1-6, and they make some changes that people aren't going to be happy with, you kind of start feeling that things might change around on this. You know, I was reading something today on Okudah was talking about, you know, losing his coach being fired. He had mixed emotions with it because
Sure.
he enjoyed him as a coach. He felt he turned his career around. But the other thing is, Okudah said he looked in the mirror and said, "It may be us, the players. We better right this ship." And so I think that had a lot to do with it. And they had a big victory in that instance. And you know the rest is history.
Right, and you know, again, some people may have thought it was the same old Lions, but you know, a lot of fans still believed. It wasn't like everybody was turning their backs on them. And actually, I had a great moment. As you know, I dressed up as Dan Campbell for Halloween,
Yes.
and that game against the Packers was the first game after Halloween. So I took my costume to Ford Field, and I got a good chuckle out of Coach Campbell. I yelled to him from the sideline, and I think he found it quite amusing that I dressed up as him for Halloween. But yeah, the crowd got into it, and you could see the beginning of things. And actually, that was the beginning of a 6 wins in 7 games. Now, part of that was there were a lot of injuries early in the season with that 1-6 start, and a lot of people don't think about that or understand the full complexity of that. But during that 6 wins in 7 games, one of them was the Minnesota game, and the momentum was continuing to grow. And you actually went down to the Vikings game in Detroit.
Yes.
What was that like?
Incredible. You know, I had season tickets and player tickets for 10 years when I lived down in the Detroit area, you know, with Lomas Brown and the Barry Sanders era and David Lutz and so on and so forth. I'll drop all the names I want, Mark Spindler.
For sure.
But, you know, the atmosphere at the Silverdome back in those days was pretty loud. Of course, when there's 80,000 people in there screaming, it got loud.
Oh,
but
yeah.
there was just something different about Ford Field when I walked in there. The atmosphere, the people in the parking lot, the people waiting to get into the games, the pregame, the guys coming through. Of course, the flip by I can't remember who it was, Sewell coming out. Just watching that, having the singer from Oxford sing, the girl, honoring number 42 was just incredible. I don't think there was a dry eye in the place.
Yeah.
And so when you saw that, and then the music and the Lions cam, where their kids are holding, the parents are holding their Lion King up.
Oh, sure.
Just those things was just incredible. That whole atmosphere, that whole time I was there, I was just awestruck on how much they have done behind the scenes to make this a winning program.
For sure. And then, again, as we see a couple wins start to happen, it's a snowball effect. And we saw that with the team. We see that with the crowd and the stadium. And, they finished, 8-2 their last
Correct.
10 games of the season. And, you and I, we bantered back and forth. We were like, I say, inches away from making that drive to Lambeau Field for that final game. And even though it didn't get us into the playoffs, I think every Detroit Lions fan was very satisfied with that game, with that victory, and basically, obviously, how the season ended.
Oh, for sure. I mean, and again, that it springboards you, like they say, into next year. They know they have something to build on. They know they were 9-8. They know they were in a playoff atmosphere. I've been reading quotes from all the coaches, and they said that game was a playoff game for them. Win or lose. And then of course Campbell saying, we're not going, they're not going. You love that stuff. And I think that's the biggest thing is they have something to build on. But they also, you look at the big loss when we got rolled over by 320-yard rushing amongst that 8-2 streak. And what happened was the younger guys started realizing we cannot miss an opportunity. The 1-6 start, maybe the Thanksgiving Day game, we pull that victory out. There's a lot of ifs, and I think a lot of those ifs will be turned turned into positives for next year. And I think that's what the biggest season is. Can't wait to see what they're going to do for the next 3-4 months to get ready.
For sure, because I think the big surprise question mark was once we started winning all those games towards the end, was that Carolina game where we were not able to stop the run. And so they obviously, it's how you respond afterwards, right? How do we respond after the Buffalo game? I told people, what matters is how they come out against Jacksonville. And they handled Jacksonville, and you saw how well Jacksonville finished their season.
Yes.
And then how do we react after the Carolina game? Well, we took care of the Bears and also the Packers to finish the season strong. So great learning moments,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, for sure. And look at the Bears game. How did it start out? I think he had 100 yards rushing in about the first minute.
Right.
Not first minute. And then, but they rallied and turned it around. And I don't care whether he was injured or not. They still, you could see they put an emphasis on stopping the run. They made a couple adjustments. Coach Glenn, I think, made a couple of adjustments on run stop, and it turned the game around. And we went into the Packers game, who was a big running team. Rodgers hasn't had his best passing stats in a long time because they've relied on the run and their running backs. And we did a great job at doing that. So I think that's the positive stuff, that right now we're getting to a point we can stop the run, and they're going to get better at it because our management that we have is just unbelievable in identifying Holmes and Campbell and the rest of them, and identifying athletes and people that are going to make the Detroit Lions a great Detroit Lions team.
For sure. I mean, Kirby Joseph, right? I mean, he has as many interceptions off Aaron Rodgers in one season as any other player in the NFL has in a lifetime. So, yeah, just like you said, so much growth from these players throughout the season. Gives us a lot of things to look forward to and hopefully build momentum of on the offseason. And it's a great spot to end. And look forward to next year. And, again, we're going to be looking at different things. We'll break down the positions coming up and different aspects of the Lions.
Okay, thanks for having me. It's awesome talking about the Honolulu Blue.
Awesome. Thanks so much for tuning in, folks. Please subscribe to the podcast to get alerts about new episodes. And until next time, stay gritty, my friends.